She has this power over me, paints the world with colors that I can't see. Oh, I wish that I could let her be higher above me. People keep saying that the world is through with it now. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. If you're gonna turn and run, better do it quick now. Well, show me how. Use the colors that you use, the colors that you use. Sometimes I can't turn the page, leave behind me all these rays. Can you take me to a higher stage, higher above me? Keep saying that the world's through with it now. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. If you're gonna turn and run, better do it quick now. Well, show me how. Show me how I can put you higher above me, above me, above me. 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 Higher above me. Thank you, guys. Well, I cannot tell you how surreal it is to actually play in a room with real people again. So happy that we can all get together in some kind of way. Start to get back to a little bit of normalcy here. So I'm going to play a song that I put out a couple years back called Brother James. And the quarantine time's been fun for me to kind of dig up some old songs that I haven't played in a while and polish them up and do quite a bit of writing as well. But this song is kind of the perspective of James, the brother of Jesus, and what I kind of think it might have been like growing up with that kind of brother, at least for him. Shared all the secrets inside. Fiery eyes gazed up into the sky. Mother always put you first. Bragged about how much you're worth. Years had passed before I'd seen the glory that stood that eventually you will pull me to your light. Brother, please keep me in your sight. For you. So this one, sadly, is like the most relevant song I have right now. It's called Anxiety. And I wrote this right after Christmas this past year, and it really started to take its form through the pandemic. And I'll just let the song do the talking. Anxiety is my only friend in the universe so full. If forgiveness is an open door, will I find you behind it? In my fear of the dark, can't break away, lead with my heart, and my tears burn so hot. Don't leave without me, and break Anxiety is my only friend in a universe so full. If forgiveness is an open door, will I find you behind it?
Good morning. Welcome to Action Church. My name is Raph. We're happy to have you guys here, especially the day after 4th of July. I know you all were partying pretty hard with your social distancing 4th of July parties. You know, I guess the only good thing with that is when there's the inevitable fireworks accident, maybe only 1 or 2 people are getting hurt instead of 15. So, you had that to look forward to. This is the first week of our new series, which, if you're having trouble reading it, it's Pearls Before Pigs. That's what I'm told that it's supposed to mean. So, we're going to look forward to figuring out what's going on with that here today. I'm sure Don's going to have a great explanation for us. So coming up, we're going to have our first youth night since quarantine started here. So that's going to be the 19th? Yeah. The 19th, and that will be in this building. We'll have more information for you next week, so that's not next Sunday, but it's the Sunday after. So any youths here, put that on your calendar. It should be a good time. So the other thing, too, is we always ask you to invite, invest, and get involved. And I know for some of you, it's a big ask to get up in the morning a little bit earlier to come in here. I get it. My wife had to literally have my daughter scream in my face this morning to get me out of bed. So if that getting up in the morning is a little challenging for you, we have another option. There's going to be a sign-up sheet out in the lobby where you can pick a day of the week to come in here and help clean a little bit. And get this place looking nice and nice and sanitized for everyone. So out in the lobby afterwards, if you have an afternoon or an evening that you'd like to come in and help us out, it'd be a big help to come in and clean. Otherwise, we always appreciate your time here on Sunday mornings is still needed. We always need people to come in the morning who are able to get up early and just an hour early. Usually 9:30 is when we start to come in and help us out, either run sound or the video, set up chairs even. There's a ton of stuff to do. And if you think there's something that we should be doing, let us know, and we might be able to find a way for you to help us out with that. And then lastly, there's investor money. So there's no backing organization. Everything that we do is funded because of you. And that's not only keeping the lights on here, but there's also plenty of charities and programs that we're able to support because of the financial investment that you give us. And the ways you do that are there's some boxes out there that if you still carry around cash, you can put those in there. There's also an iPad out there that you can swipe your card or you can pay using the app. So, we look forward to hearing from Don what this Pearls Before Bees is all about.
Thank you, Raph. I thought it was Necklace Murder Hornet for Piglets. That's what I was thinking it was, so thank you for that. And all of you out there that are streaming, one thing I'm excited about is this is a holiday weekend, but I'm hearing already like, hey, we're at the beach, but we are, we're quarantined, but we're at the beach, and we're watching on online. And thanks to Mike and Mitch, and my goodness, I watched last week to kind of see the change with the new cameras and the new setup. I was like, that is amazing that little old Action Church can pull that off, although I'm going to need hair and makeup now since the cameras are so much better. So keep that in mind. But we are talking about this phrase, really, pearls before swine, and it's really asking the question, I guess, we could start with sort of, what would Jesus tweet? Because we live in a world where communication has changed. The way we think of communicating with each other and with our neighbors and our friends and our family might be more from our thumbs than from our vocal cords. But have the laws of communication, the rules for communication, the way we deal with each other as humans and family members, and especially as followers of Christ, have those really changed? And so I thought we'd go back this month and sort of learn from Jesus, not from me because I have not figured it out, but learn from Jesus sort of how to communicate with each other. But I want to start with a quick question. this is sort of a quiz, but you'll be graded, but I'm not going to be mad at you if you don't get it. Like, somebody pointed this out to me a couple of weeks ago. I saw this, and I thought, I didn't really get it. It said, what's wrong with this vacation photo? And they were talking about how weird vacation photos looked from 20 years ago. And I was like, well, that looks like a photo to me. But it was pointed out, and then it struck me like, oh, that's not how anybody's vacation photos look anymore, right? Like, nobody goes to the Statue of Liberty and takes a picture of the Statue of Liberty anymore. We put what? We put ourselves into the picture. And so I realized, like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Technology with our phones and forward-facing cameras, and technology has changed, and the way we relate to each other has changed. And without thinking about it, like, even our photos have completely changed, because there was a time, and this is where, as the old guy, I get to sort of help out. There was a time we shared photos in photo albums and slideshows. Now, you don't know what a slideshow is, and so I'll tell you, but you know photo albums, right? Do you remember? Like, because you had someone in your family. My mom passed a year ago, but my mom, like, if she caught you with a photo album, oh my goodness, you were in for an afternoon, Or even better than a photo album, those were the ones she'd sort of prepared, but just a box of pictures. And she's like, I want to show you some pictures. And you're like, oh, God. And you're trying, you're thinking of all the things you could do, like trying to think of an excuse, like, I have a surgery scheduled, right? You're not a doctor. Like, anything, but if you sat down next to my mother, and now I sort of miss it because she's gone, like, she would explain each picture. Like, remember those days when the way that you interacted with someone's photo from their vacation, or from their trip to New Orleans, or from their business trip, like, the way that you would relate to that is the person is sitting there with you, and they're sort of explaining each photo. And my mom, very detailed. And then she would go back and go, oh, no, I forgot to tell you this about this person that you didn't know. That was the way and so it was a project with her. Or there were things when I was a kid called slideshows where people would be invited to your homes, and my parents were, my dad was a pastor, so we had to deal with missionary slideshows. Like, occasionally there'd be like boobies in them, but other than that, as a kid, there was nothing interesting about missionary slideshows. But it was crazy because, like, these people would come to your house and set up a screen and get the slide projector out, and then you would all just sit there for an hour and 45 minutes while they explained every picture. And so, like, I guess the truth is, like, we found a better way to do that, right? So it's like, we don't have to do that. We don't have to, like, sit down with your mom and go through a box of pictures while she explains everything. And you don't have to sit there while the family friend or foe drones on about their trip to Europe and you watch slideshow. And we found a much better way where we just sort of, like, we send our pictures out and people can, like, glance at them or not glance at them and sort of respond, and we feel good about that. Like, look at all these likes I got, and look at all this, people are so nice, and people retweeted that. I mean, that's fantastic. And so, generally speaking, and this is coming from an old man who's really not on social media, I think we would say that, and I was reading some surveys from just 10 years ago, that most people, it was in the 80s, I think, like 80 percentile, not 1980s, said that the internet and social media made us feel more connected to people than ever. But just 10 years later, it's interesting, the sort of the story is completely swapped. The story is that the connection that we felt earlier is sort of tearing us apart, that the fact that we share our lives and we share everything with each other, and we got used to the idea that, hey, we don't have to explain this photo to our friends and families and coworkers and whoever else wants to join in, and everybody can see it, and we're wide open for business. They can come and look at our photos, and we have our face in it. We sort of, I believe, my theory is that felt sort of good. And as humans, we responded by, well, if that was good, let's do more. So we selfied ourselves into everything. And in fact, if you think about how life has changed, and we've talked about this before, it sort of changed our behavior. It's interesting, like, to go to a concert now, and there are literally people at the concert doing this. Like, back turned to the stage with an iPad, or, like, just capturing themselves, but never really like, I've seen people like not watching the music, just and then down we've got to post this, and it's like, so we sort of self-feed ourselves into everything. And where in the past we use this technology and everything, where in the past maybe we would read a newspaper and then we would discuss it with our family or our friends at work or someone at the coffee shop. Like my dad still goes, I was laughing because he's in Missouri, and he said, I found a coffee shop that's a good place to go talk politics. And I was like, oh, that's got to be amazing. Like all these old farmers talking politics there. But that's what we did. That was a normal thing. Now, what came of that is problems. What happened then, out of sort of all, I think, good intentions, and hey, this is so much easier, and hey, this is more efficient. Like more people can sort of follow my journey. Like my trip to the Grand Canyon, I don't just have to go over to my mom's house and show her the photos. Like I can share these with everyone. And it was good, and we were happy until all of a sudden this person we don't know go, hey, nice shirt, man, boobs. And you're like, where did that come from? And it feels like that person sort of came into your house while you were showing them your photo album and made a bad comment. But the truth is, you sort of went to their house with your photo album, and now they're involved in commenting on your life, and now it's a mess. And now we have, sort of a... And I don't have to tell you about the cancel culture, but it's come to the point, like I was listening to someone talk about how they posted a story of riding an elephant as a child, like 40 years ago, and they were getting all this pushback and cancel culture, like almost canceled because they had ridden an elephant 40 years ago, and people are like, that's cruel, and you're oppressing elephants. It's like, I know elephants live a long time. They were probably still alive by now, but it's like, I was a kid. It was $1. Like my dad put me on there, and that's the world we live in. And it can get a lot more serious. Like we can, as I talked about last week, like we can literally post something when we're 15 and be unemployable when we're 30, and that's a scary concept. And so I thought we'd talk about not what I think about that, or sort of what society or culture says about that, because I don't think we have an answer from them. But I thought we'd go to Jesus, because Jesus was this fantastic communicator. And the reason why I know he was a fantastic communicator is because he told these stories that still work today. In fact, it's just amazing. And I never get tired of this. I never get tired of, like, I was having a conversation last week, and we were talking with a guy about how people were acting, at his work, and he was talking about, like, oh, and they're not grateful even though they worked through the pandemic, and he was going on about this, and I said, there's a story in the Bible just like that. It's called the parable of the vineyard owner, and Jesus told a story where some people got paid, and they worked all day, and he kept hiring people later in the day, and they got paid, but at the end, everybody was mad at each other because they all got paid the same, and some thought, well, I worked longer, and he just got hired, and I was like, that's human nature 2,200 years ago. And so I never get tired of looking at how wise and just how amazing Jesus' communication was. So I thought we'd learn it, and where this sermon series sort of gets its title is this simple idea, and I think it's the place to start. Because what we're going to do this month is really talk about how Jesus said we should communicate with everyone, like people outside the faith, people we don't know very well, brothers and sisters. Jesus talked about, and the early Christians worked about how to fight fair in a family. I mean, that's, in the Christian family, if you're a follower of Christ, how to fight fair in your church and in your family, because disagreements will happen, and they happened in the New Testament and happened in the Old Testament, usually settled with spears in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, they found a better way. But I think we got to start with sort of this idea of the cancel culture first. Because I think as Christians especially, we have a real dilemma when it comes to what we should communicate. Because on one hand, we're nice people and we want to be nice. And we don't want to offend people, most of us. There's a couple of you that kind of like it. But other than that, like most of us as Christians, we're like, I don't want to offend people. But on the other hand, as Christians, we believe really offensive things to some people. And then there's sort of that tension of like, what do I share and what do I not share? Like, at what point am I just sort of like dumping stuff on people that they don't need to hear and is upsetting to them? And at what point am I denying Christ because I'm not telling the truth anymore? And so I thought we'd go to Jesus because this is a real problem for us. It's a real problem for us as Christians, like what to say, what to not say when we're denying Christ, because Scripture is really clear. If we deny him on earth, he'll deny us in heaven. And when we're just not being wise. So got a simple sort of start for this, and then we'll carry on in this series to kind of go more in depth in different ways that Jesus taught us to communicate. So Matthew 7, it says this. And it's funny because I have read this a million times. But I never really thought until the last few weeks like that these two things were tied together. I've heard the pearls before swine my whole life. I've heard the judge not that ye be not judged my whole life. But I never realized, and this is what's so important that we read the Bible sort of together, that it's all sort of part of the same idea. So Jesus said this, and this is probably familiar. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it'll be measured out to you. Now, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take that speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank sticking out of your own eye? You hypocrite. First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. And it goes on. This is one thought, and this is important. He says, do not give to dogs what is sacred, and do not throw your pearls to pigs. See, we weren't totally crazy. That's where this came from. And if you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Now, you've heard this part. Don't judge. But I want you to notice something about this, and this is so important because this verse has been, this one's been really messed up over the years. Like, we've used this, and I think some people with good intentions have used this to the extreme and went, well, I just can't judge anything. That guy appears to be lighting a baby on fire in front of me, but who am I to judge? No. It's interesting that it says don't judge, and then he says, but when you judge. And if you're wondering, Jesus was all for judging, but he was also for judging in a correct way. And so that's why it says, don't judge, lest you be judged, but when you judge. So just to clear that up, in John 7:24, Jesus says this, and this is his standard. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. So Jesus, in fact, he often said, man, you humans, you look on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. So Jesus was for judging, but what he wanted to make sure that we do is not become judges or judgmental, but also that we're judging correctly. So it's very, very important that you get this. This is not a story of like, hey, make sure that you have no opinion on anyone's behavior. That's not what he's saying at all. But he is saying, if you are a person who passes public judgment on everyone's behavior around you, guess what, right? Like, people are going to push back on that. Like, if you're the head of the HOA and you go around and measure everyone's grass length in the neighborhood, don't think you're going to get to go on vacation and not mow your lawn. That's what Jesus is saying. He's like, if you're the person who points out everybody's problems, trust me, people are going to notice yours. So he says, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. So it's not that we never pass judgment. It's so important that we do that. Like, we cannot live a successful life without judging. In fact, it's so funny because we think of discrimination now as like, treating someone unfairly because of their color or race or creed or, pet choice, whatever. It's everything in our world, but actually discriminating taste or discriminating judgment is a good thing. It means choosing between right and wrong, good and bad. And Jesus would say, make sure that you're judging fairly. You're not just looking at someone and judging, but you are judging fairly. So he said, for the same way you judge, you'll be judged. So what that means online as well as offline, like there's no separate rule for online, offline, is that if you're in the business of taking down others, you're going to get taken down. And I shouldn't say I've never, because it does happen. Like there are people that are just crazy and angry that are going to come after you. But Jesus would say, and I would say, sort of the less you're in the business of pointing out others' faults in a public way, probably the less they're going to come after you. And dunking on others. I understand that's what it's called. Lots of people talk about dunking that cannot dunk. I can just tell from looking at them. See, I pass judgment. That's bad. But that's actually good. I can tell they can't dunk. But here's the thing, like what Jesus would say here, and it's so important online, but it's really honestly like it's just a life principle. That when you're critical, when you find yourself like, oh, I just have to say what I think about everything. It's interesting because I've dealt with this. Like I used to say what I thought about everything. Well, at some point, people are going to let you know what they think about you. And so Jesus brought it down. And then so he's saying like, clearly, if you're in the judgment business, you're going to get judged more frequently. But then he sort of points out something that's true about us today, and it was true about them then, and it was true about everyone in the Middle Ages. And that's what's so amazing about Jesus' wisdom is it's kind of like he could say something and it turned out to be true for all people of all time. He says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? And Jesus was funny, clearly, because nobody has a plank sticking out of their eye. Although I have seen some pretty cool pictures on the internet. That's what it's good for, like with a chisel through someone's head. Like that is what the internet's good for, but I've never seen like a 2x4 sticking out of someone's eye. But Jesus is saying, like, clearly, it's so much easier to notice small faults in others than it is like the big faults we have. And that's just human nature. It's like because we're used to us, and we've made 1,000 excuses for us. Like we're like, oh, sure, I do that. But notice that terrible little thing that they do. And so Jesus just sort of nailed us. And then I want you to notice and think about this. Like in some ways, this guy that he's sort of pointing out is terrible. He's like, he's got a 2x4 sticking out of his eye, and he's going, hey, let me help you with that tiny little speck. But notice at least he was going to the person, because the thing that we're seeing in our world is that we sort of notice the faults of others and we're not going to them. We don't go to them and go, hey, I've got a problem with this. And we're going to talk about this in a few weeks, sort of the church's plan that worked back then and still works today for fighting among Christians, where first rule of Fight Club is not to talk about Fight Club. First rule of Church Fight Club is to talk about Church Fight Club, like how it's supposed to happen. And one thing that's not supposed to happen is that I have a problem with you, and then I publicly tell everyone else what my problem is with you. And that's really the source of friction, like throughout our world right now. And it's interesting because it's not really different because it's online, but sort of like how our photographs have changed, it's just so much easier, isn't it? Like it's so much easier to just post your selfie with the Statue of Liberty than it is to take that picture of the Statue of Liberty, come back, invite someone to your house, show them the slideshow, or take the box of pictures to your mom. Like, we've just made it easier to do this. This has always happened. Like, this is called gossip. And it's always happened, and it was a problem then, and it's a problem now, and we'll talk about that in the next coming week. But, like, whenever you see this, we sort of go, well, what is the problem? We want to get involved in, like, fixing the problem. It's like, oh, no, we're witnessing a big lack of judgment at the moment the person is sharing it with everyone else and not the person that did it. And so that's what Jesus said. You hypocrite. He said, like, you hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to remove the speck. So Jesus gives us sort of this plan of action, and it starts with us first. That's probably the most important word in this is first. Like the first thing you do when, you are annoyed with someone's behavior is, as Christians, what Jesus would say is like, you work on you. Like you do the takedown on you. Like start there. And self-reflection, it just sucks. So he knew it wouldn't be easy. You know, he's just going like, hey, why don't you first work on that plank sticking out of your eye? But the problem with this whole, and I'm convinced why he said the next thing, is because there's a human nature problem that we all have. Because eventually, we sort of get the biggest plank out of our own eye. We go, hey, I'm dealing with my stuff. You know, I think I'm getting better. I think I'm actually growing. I'm actually dealing with stuff. And I've had some moments where I've talked to my family members and we haven't had a shouting match, and I've pointed out a few things and maybe helped them in some way. And so here's what happens next. As Christians, we go, all right, now it's time to get on to the good work of cleaning everybody else up, right? Like now that we've done that, I mean, I read, like, make sure that you don't have any glaring sins sticking out of your eye, and then make sure you go to the people around you. Then the next logical step is, all right, let's go to town, man. Let's clean this place up. Let's help America. Like we're gonna make America. I almost said make America great again, but that's what we're going to do. We're gonna clean this place up. That was actually just a slip. And so then Jesus said this, which is interesting when you really think about, like, this is all one thing. Like, if you're gonna judge, you're definitely gonna get judged. But make sure that when you do judge, because we all judge, make sure that you have a steady hand, and that you're not, and that's where the measure thing comes into place with the plank and the speck of sawdust. Like, make sure you're not expecting perfection from everyone else, and you've got 1,000 excuses for you. But when you get pretty good at it, let's say that your life is pretty respectable. Before you sort of push send on your message to the world, Jesus said this. He said, do not give to dogs what is sacred, and do not throw your pearls to pigs. For if you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Now, Mitch pointed out, we did use some pretty cute little piglets. They would not tear you to pieces. Maybe we should put up some different pig pictures, because pigs are freaking scary animals. If you've ever been around a pig farm, and then let's not even talk about what he was talking about, which is sort of wild pigs. Wild pigs that can literally tear you to bits. And what he's saying is, like, you may feel good trying to, like, pin some. I'm imagining that, you know, some people thought, like, he was saying, like, feed them pearls. I don't think so. I think they were trying to put a necklace on them. That was always my vision of this. Like, you go up and go, hey, I'm going to fix this pig up and put some nice pearl necklace on them, and then they tear you to bits because they don't appreciate pearls. But here's the thing about pearls. Like, the way pearls were used in the Bible throughout Scripture is sort of as a it was very valuable, because on one hand, it was a sort of a synonym for wisdom, you know, that wisdom is better than pearls, and you would get this picture of pearls throughout Proverbs. Now, in the New Testament, the way Jesus used pearls, which is really interesting, is we think of it as pearls of wisdom because of that saying, which came from Proverbs. But Jesus used pearls to talk about the gospel, which is even more precious if you're a Christian this morning. Jesus said that the gospel was like a pearl of great price. It was like a pearl that the merchant discovered. Like, he was digging through the bin of pearls, and he was like, oh my goodness, that's the most valuable pearl in the whole world. And then he goes back and sells everything so that he can gain it. He's like, that's the way it is with salvation. Like, when you understand, like, the kind of life that Jesus is offering, you're willing to sort of put aside everything else because it's the most important thing. And so he's going, hey, this pearl thing, my guess is he's talking about the gospel, but if nothing else, he's talking about something super valuable like wisdom. And then he's saying, you know, don't give them to dogs and pigs. And dogs, if you're not Jewish this morning, he was talking about us, because they would say that Gentile people were dogs. People outside the faith were dogs. So these are people outside the faith. And pigs were the one animal that they were not allowed to eat or raise, because they were considered the most filthy thing, which you might go, well, that was kind of mean of God to do that. Trichinosis. Pretty good idea not to eat pigs when there aren't, when there isn't refrigeration. So this is actually like, and I like to think of pearls because If you think of pearls of wisdom, this is my theory of wisdom. It's like dealing with something irritating for a very long time will eventually give you wisdom, or you will kill it. One of those things is true. But it's interesting that what Jesus is saying is something really pretty sort of offensive. Well, there's no pretty sort of, like very offensive. He's saying, like, don't think that even if you're all squared away, you feel like, because none of us truly are, and you feel like, oh, I've got something to offer. I've got something to offer now. Like, I've cleaned myself up and I've cleaned my family up, and now I'm going to get to cleaning up the world around me. I'm going to make them do what I think is right. He said, man, don't give pearls to pigs. Like, they don't appreciate pearls. And they don't appreciate you trying to give them pearls. And that's still true, isn't it, right? Like, as offensive as that idea is and was to them, and as much as a Christian you go, well, that's not very nice. It's still true, right? Like, trying to share wisdom with someone who is foolish. And that's a big word in the Bible. In fact, that's why we got to be very careful about that. He said it was as bad to call someone a fool as to murder them. And you go, no, I think I'd rather be called a fool than be murdered, Jesus. But what he was saying is when you talk about a fool in the Bible, and in the sense of the way Proverbs and Ecclesiastes talked about it, a fool is someone who literally chooses to do the opposite of the truth. Like, they know the truth, and they just allow themselves to be fooled and actually choose to do the opposite. And that's true today. Like, your pearls of wisdom, especially in a world where we can just broadcast them, not going to be appreciated. Probably not going to turn someone around and go, you know what? I think you're right about that. From now on, that's the way I'm going to do things. And I was thinking about this, like, can you think, and I went through and thought, like, Jesus did very few sort of hot takes on culture. I could think of a couple. Jesus talked about a tower that fell over, and he said, do you think, he was making a point, he said, you know that tower that fell over in Siloam? Do you think that, you like to think that everybody who's harmed is they're bad people and the good people live? He's like, do you think they were the most wicked people in Siloam, or were they just under the tower when it fell? And he was making a point about their idea of, good people have good things happen to them. And he said the rain falls on the just and the unjust. So he's making a point. So I guess that's a hot take, because that seemed to be a cultural event. Jesus did a few hot takes on Roman soldiers, because the Jews came to him and go, these racist Roman soldiers, they say if they catch us out, they can make us carry their pack for a mile. Like, you're the Messiah. What are you going to do about that? And he said, if they ask for you for 1 mile, go 2 miles. That's where the whole second mile thing came. So I guess that's a hot take. But I can't think of many other things he talked about that were of the moment. Or, this also struck me, maybe he did. Maybe he did. We read in John where it says, like, if we, this is just partial listing of what Jesus did. Like, all the books in the world basically couldn't hold what he did and said in his time here on earth. But if he did do sort of what we would think of hot takes on what's King Agrippa up to, we don't remember him. And the reason why we don't remember them is because nobody wrote them down. And isn't that interesting that that's still true today? I mean, people lost their jobs over what they said about Cecil the lion, right? And that seems like a long time ago. There's still probably family members that aren't speaking because of their disagreement over Cecil the lion. And so if we're in the business of sort of hot takes on everything that comes our way, and like, we got to share what we know, I got to set some people straight. Well, Jesus would say they're not going to appreciate it. Good chance they're going to tear you apart for even saying it. If you don't believe Jesus, I do. How about Dale Carnegie? I love this, and I've always thought of this quote, and I really didn't realize this came, but it was from How to Win Friends and Influence People. Probably the best book ever written on influence and making friends. It's all in the title. But he said, those convinced, I've heard this my whole life, and it's so true. Those convinced against their will are of the same opinion still. It even rhymes, which means it's smart. So it's so interesting. Like, Jesus, years ago, said, hey, don't put your pearls before swine. And don't give sacred things to dogs. Like offering communion to a dog, not going to work out. Like he's not going to appreciate the meaning of that. And then he said, like, and it's probably going to turn out badly for you. So what do we do in our sort of selfie world where we sort of put ourselves, if you think about like in the same way we can't imagine going on vacation and not putting ourselves in the picture, I think that's spread into every area of life. Like it feels like that every news story you need to sort of selfie yourself in and say, here's what I think about this. Or every sort of cultural event we need to say, and here's what I need to say about this, think about this. But maybe, here's what I was thinking. And this doesn't mean like, oh, Don said throw your phone away. No, I'm not saying that at all. You might want to check your selfie count. I checked mine. I have 44 selfies out of 6,000 photos on my phone right now, which I would have told you had none. Until I was like, 44? Like how? And I was actually checking. I'm like, these can't be because I don't take selfies and I have 44 on my phone. Weird. What's your number? Like, you might want to check that. And then think about this. Like, how are you sort of inserting yourself into news stories and events and everything? And then ask yourself this. Not for me, but because of Jesus. Like, how are you sharing your journey? And I'm not just talking about your trip to the Statue of Liberty. I don't care. Post your selfies. But wouldn't it probably be better, and I know you can do this online as well, instead of trying to share our journey with sort of random strangers, what if we had that same thought? Like, I'm going to make sure that I share my life with people that I could have a conversation with. And maybe because of technology and pandemics and things like that and jet travel, maybe you don't have to sit down with your mom with a box of photos anymore. Maybe that's a good thing. Would have been a good thing for me because I spent many hours like that. You just got trapped, and you would sort of fake an illness or an injury and then go to the bathroom and never come back. And she didn't notice. Like, she just grabbed another kid. It worked fine. But here's the thing. Like, maybe you don't have to do that. But I think what Jesus would say is we need to think more like that. Like to think like, what part of our journey are we sharing that's sacred? I mean, that's in our family, that's in our faith. And are we broadcasting that? Now, that's where it feels weird for a Christian. Because you sort of think, but yeah, Don, I'm not sure I agree, though, because aren't I supposed to share my faith? Aren't I supposed to share my life and my journey with others? I've thought a lot about that. And I want to read to you sort of in closing, not what I think. I'm the guy without social media and still have 44 selfies on my phone somehow. I don't know what to do. But I know this. Peter could not keep his mouth shut. We know that from Scripture. We know that Peter was sort of like the loudmouth of all 12 disciples. Like, he's the guy who would just say, Jesus is on a mountain, and Moses and Elijah appear as ghosts. And Peter raises his hands and goes, you want me to build like a tent for you guys or something? How you feeling? You feel comfortable? Or maybe we could build some sort of festival. And he's like, shut up, Peter. I don't know how many times Jesus basically said, shut up, Peter. And sometimes it was great because Peter would just say the thing that was right, but he would always blurt it out. Like, who do you think I am? He's like, the Christ, the Son of the living God. And he's like, exactly. And so Peter was the guy who could not keep his mouth shut. And he couldn't control his impulses. He's the guy who cut the ear off the guy attacking Jesus when they came into the garden to grab him for the cross. It's like Peter's the first guy who pulls a gun. He pulled a knife and cut the guy's ears off. And Jesus is like, no, and heals the guy. So we know that Peter had sort of impulse control. And so I'm like, what we should listen to Peter is later in his life, he wrote this. And I want you to notice what he said. He said, but in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always, always. He lived his life like this. He gave his life for this. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give a reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. For it is better, if it is God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. Like, you come back up and play another song for us. But I want to pray with you. And I want to encourage you, as I am going to try to do, like, let's take Peter's advice to go, let's be ready with an answer. And notice what it says, for anyone who asks. I find that about advice. Like, I will give advice when people ask, but I'm out of the business of unsolicited advice. Number one, it's usually wrong from me. But number two, like, it's not received. But when someone asks and go, hey, Don, what do you think about this? What Peter said, after all those years of learning, is be ready. Be ready to give an answer when someone goes, hey, this faith thing, you seem different about this. Or what's your take on this? Like, oh, I'm ready. I've got something because I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ. I have the Holy Spirit within me. Like, I'm ready for this. But I like what he said about keeping a clear conscience. He's like, don't be that annoying person who's got a hot take on everything. And man, they're gonna tell you what to do, and they're gonna tell you what you think. And then when somebody comes back at them, and and somebody sort of tries to cancel them, or they get a lot of negative feedback, they're like, I can't believe what happened. Look how mean these people. Like, no, don't be that person. But understand, people may attack you anyway. But if they do, at least you'll have a clear conscience. Like, I'm not telling you if you do everything Jesus says that you're going to survive in a cancel culture, because there are some crazy people. I had a guy at Lowe's or at Home Depot challenge me to a fight in the aisle because I stepped in front of him. And I did something weird. I didn't realize he was standing there looking, and I stepped in front and grabbed something. And the next thing I knew, he was asking me to go outside to fight me. And I'm like, oh, it's on now. It feels crazy now. But see, so I'm not telling you, like, people are on edge. And I think it's weird. I was thinking later, I was like, maybe it's the mask thing, just like sort of the anonymity of the internet. Like, like we both have masks on, so it's like it was just antisocial Lord of the Flies. It was just so crazy. And I was thinking, like, but I didn't, obviously. Well, nobody wins a fight in a Home Depot aisle. Come on. Silly. But I was thinking, like, what Peter says is so wise. Like, when you walk away and someone attacks you online, at least it's not because you caused it. You have a clear conscience. And so let's pray. And let's start diving into this thing. But let's start with what Peter said and what Jesus said, which is, don't think that your pearls of wisdom are just going to change the world just because you throw them out there. It's not going to work out. But Peter said, make sure that you have an answer ready when people ask, and live a life so that even when people say bad things about you, it's just ridiculous because it's so clearly not true. Dear Lord, we are grateful for your wisdom. God, I pray for everyone in the sound of my voice and those that are online and those who will watch this week. God, we have so much power and so much bandwidth and so much ability to sort of connect with others, even though we may be isolated physically. And there's sort of never been a better time to share our lives with others, and maybe never been a more dangerous and terrible time as well. But God, I'm grateful that your wisdom and your plan works every time it's tried. And God, I pray that we would be those kinds of people, the people who live lives that are just so clearly blameless and good that when people attack us, that it's just silly. In your name we pray. Amen.
Just to kind of continue with what Don was talking about. What's amazing is like even yesterday I was plagued by so many posts of really woke white people saying how you're racist for celebrating 4th of July. I saw endless amounts of that stuff. And I always see it's this trend where if someone's that loudest voice, that they're always condemning other people from the safety of their phone. If I ever have a chance to meet those people, they're not the nicest people. They usually don't really have time for other people. And this last song was one that I wrote way back after what had happened in Charlottesville and all the unrest that kind of dug back up for our country. And sadly, the more I've played it, the more events I can pile on top of it and add meaning to it, especially what has happened most recently. But it's about not right words, but right action. It's about how we can not just sit on the sidelines, but we can act out in love for these people that are hurting. And that change isn't going to come from a really snarky social media post. That's going to come for how we love those people and how we advocate for them. This is called Song Unsung. I will not be the only one who will leave this song unsung. All the lies I've told, my fear takes hold. You turn your head away. Seeking out your warm embrace, something to keep me warm, just a chance to see your face before the day's done. You may call me insincere, body full of holes. I walked these streets for many years, a chance to be with you. I will not be the only one who will leave this song unsung. And all the lies I've told, my fear takes hold. Turn your head away. I will not be the only one. Leave this song unsung. All the lies I've told, when my fear takes hold, the Father will turn his head. Brought me out of misery, like a tire from the mud. Sometimes I still can't hear your voice. Are you there at all? Am I just an old machine the days that passed since I saw you last, my friend, will meet again. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you everyone for coming out today, and thank you for Sean for providing music for us. It was great. Just a couple of quick announcements before I let you go. Just remember we're asking for help to clean up the building throughout the week, and the sign-up sheet is out in the lobby. And there's also for anyone on the live stream, there's a sign-up on Facebook as well. And then for anyone here in the building, we do need to clean off the tables and put those away. So if you can stay and help us out with that, would be fantastic. Thanks everyone. Have a great week.